I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey y'all, I'm Molly Barrows and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast, where we cover some of the most scandalous crimes and cases that bubble up right here in Northwest Florida and well beyond. Joining me as always to talk about these what the feezy cases is Pam Hill. She's a pharmacist and a victim's advocate, sadly has experienced violent crime in her own life, so she brings a unique and experienced perspective to a lot of these cases. And as you know, we don't always cover cases that originate from the Gulf Coast, although we have more than a few that we are following, including Dr. Ben Brown, the plastic surgeon, who's been recently charged with negligent homicide in connection with the death of his wife, who died after he performed several procedures on her in his office. We've also got a couple of other interesting cases that have popped up recently that we're looking into. And so we're going to continue to talk about those Gulf Coast Confidential cases involving Gulf Coast cases as well. But this one is another one that I think a lot of people can relate to. Because it's a name that you will probably recognize, at least if you're in our age group and maybe even a little bit younger. But this episode is called From That 70s Show to Prison, the Danny Masterson case. This is, of course, about Danny Masterson, the actor on that show who was convicted of raping two women in 2003. That's when the rapes alleged to have occurred. He wasn't convicted until recently. But there was a third count of rape that was basically the jury was hung and they couldn't get it. But this is a fascinating case. It took decades for it to come out, and for a good reason. Or one of the reasons that the victims say is that they were all members of the Church of Scientology. And if you've heard anything at all about the Church of Scientology, then this shouldn't come as a big shock or surprise that they try to minimize any sort of bad press that may come out, including rape accusations against Danny Masterson, because he was a high-profile member of the church, just like Tom Cruise. As far as I know, Tom Cruise has never been accused of anything like this. But this organization has had numerous allegations filed against them of stalking, harassment, enabling abuse, hiding and covering up for abusers. And that's a lot of what I feel like we've heard about in this Masterson case. Oh, yeah.
Not just that, they suppress the individual and alienate them from their family, and even go so far to tell them, if something happened to you, it's your own fault. You know, like that. And then say, girlfriends can't be raped. You know, they say the most ridiculous stuff, and it's almost like they're protected because they live in their own little world. They probably have their own resources, and from what I understand, it's a lot.
Of
lot of money going around there.
Well, and then there were some interesting familiar themes that came up when I was reading about this case, too. You know, there's a civil suit along with the criminal charges. And essentially a documentary came out that interviewed several people who claimed to have been drugged and sexually assaulted by Danny Masterson when he was at the height of his popularity and career in the early 2000s when he was on that 70s show. He'd been a child actor in and around Hollywood for years. His brother had also been a child actor. He'd found some obviously big success with that 70s show. And apparently this is when some of these rapes were happening. And then this documentary came out several years later talking about how the Church of Scientology had suppressed everyone involved, and parts of the ways they were doing that was by having them sign arbitration agreements, basically saying you can't go to a civil court of law to have this looked at and evaluated for fairness and et cetera, et cetera. You have to have basically a 3 or 4 panel member of people that are in good standing with the Church of Scientology to hear your case. Well, they're arguing in court, why would we do that? These are the very same people that have suppressed the information to begin with. This is going to re-traumatize these alleged victims. This isn't going to be helpful. We don't want to do it. We're not going to get justice. It's not a court of justice. So the arbitration agreement was interesting. That popped up a lot in the Ben Brown case. A lot of the patients, and supposedly that was from North Florida surgeons who oversees and handles like HR and payroll and insurance. But they would have these patients supposedly sign these arbitration agreements. So it makes it hard for them to pursue civil litigation in the event that they did feel like there was some medical malpractice. So here you have the Church of Scientology asking its members, apparently, unbeknownst to them, is what some of these victims said, sign these arbitration agreements. And then on top of that, they have them basically sign paperwork that say, you're supposed to not report, our rules, and you're a person in bad standing. And I don't remember all their terms.
Suppressed.
Yeah, you're a suppressive person, but the punishment is much like the Mormon Church. If you get out of line, if you don't want to toe their party line, then you're isolated, you're kicked out of the organization, you're isolated from friends and family that may still be in there. So it's like penalized to the nth degree if you don't stay controllable.
Right.
And so that's what I hear in this Scientology, reading these reports about the Masterson case, is that they really tried to suppress these people by threatening their relationships, threatening to isolate them, stalking them, harassing them, stepping up the pressure when they still weren't getting what they wanted, and basically setting up their law as being higher than the law of the land. You said you'd never go to the police. We're supposed to be able to do whatever we want to you. They're not trustworthy.
I never thought someone would rape me.
Right.
I mean, I didn't know I needed to think out every scenario. It says it's the Church of Scientology. And so I've always, not understood what's going on, but I've read and read and read. I grew up in the 70s. I graduated from high school in 1977. So the 70s show, I can relate to it. It's fun. I didn't like Danny Masterson's character because I didn't necessarily like people like that. I didn't like it. I like more like most girls do. Ashton's kind of, fun and silly and whatever and cute. So, I mean, and then you got Fez. Did you know Fez stood for Foreign Exchange Student?
That's funny. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And then you've got the girls and the parents and stuff. And it seems so wholesome. But behind all that, in their real life, they were kind of icky people. Those grown men were trying to get with like Mila Kunis and with these other girls. Chrissy Bixler's one of them. She's from Alabama. She's from Ozark, Alabama. And so she's one of the girls that leveled some of these accusations. One of the girls, yeah. And then, so, I mean, you've got this, and I remember one time they were on a show talking about how Ashton and Mila met. And it was they thought it was going to be funny. And it was so uncomfortable to watch because he was like, this one bet me $20 I couldn't stick my tongue down her throat.
Oh, gosh.
And it was Rosie O'Donnell. And Rosie O'Donnell's doesn't say anything. Nobody in the audience says anything. It's very uncomfortable for them. Then I guess they get a clue and start talking about something else. But I mean, that's their culture. And that's what they're going to do. Here we are again, 14-year-old girls, 15-year-old girls with grown men pretending like they're 16 and 17. So, I mean, it's a lot of mental stuff going on there.
I know.
And they make bucks. I mean, they were saying any of them could make anywhere from $100,000 an episode up to $300,000, which is what Danny made. $300,000 an episode.
Right. And with that kind of money comes influence, comes power. Nobody wants to rock the boat of a successful show. Nobody wants to be the one to cast aspersions against a successful actor because there's so many financial repercussions that come along with that. I feel like that's the same theme that I recently saw in that documentary, Fallen Idols, about Nick Carter. They talked a lot about that, with success and power comes influence and the ability to basically work as an organization to silence people who might say something negative about you. Of course, that's still being played out. He's not been charged. He claims his innocence, but there were some very similar themes in that whole Hollywood scene of basically, children as well as young adults and people of all ages. It's sex is a commodity. That's the currency.
Yeah.
And it's payment sometimes, I guess, in order to move up the ranks and get good jobs and positions. And then once you are there, the accountability begins to diminish because they don't want to rock the boat for a successful show or a successful actor. So they turn the other way and look the other way. That's what I feel like also came out of that Quiet on the Set, the documentary about the Nickelodeon. That blew me away. That young man that spoke about the abuse that he suffered at the hands of a person that was an employee on the set of that show, and just the horrendous abuse that he allegedly suffered. And he did finally go to the police, and the police charged that individual. And he said, when he was in court, that there was no one there on his side, but there were all these people in the industry that were supporting his abuser and even wrote letters to the judge. And I think we saw something similar like that in the Masterson case as well.
Oh, yeah.
And it's almost like saying, you don't matter. How dare you come forward, And I know that we do need to walk that line. People are innocent until proven guilty. But at the same time, when you are coming forward with very personal, vulnerable, horrific allegations, at the very least, be respectful and listen.
Right.
And don't sit there and put pen to paper immediately saying, well, he really did me a favor when he got me a good job one time. So if he was using, you know, artificial devices to rape somebody, I hate it, but I can't imagine that happened because he helped me.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, see, that's selfish thinking. And, you know, Hollywood always thinks that the rules don't apply to them. If you're the person in authority, to me, that's what tells me what's a good person. When you could misuse authority, but you don't, that's a gentle, good person. In my opinion, that's a Christian person. Because this person is the victim. Don't bash them. Let them come forward. If you haven't done anything wrong, who cares?
Right.
You know?
And that's obviously what we saw with the whole Harvey Weinstein exposés and that exposing that culture of how his money and power insulated and protected him from numerous allegations of abuse. Of course, he was convicted of rape, but then now I think that he's appealing that. I think one of those cases has been overturned. Don't quote me on that. I'm speaking off the top of my head. I hadn't watched it that closely lately. But this was all happening around the same time that Masterson, these women started coming forward about him too. He wasn't charged with these crimes until 2020. So these crimes allegedly happened in the early 2000s. So you're talking 20 years later. And it was the same with Harvey Weinstein, I think too. But, you know, people finally get to where they're fed up and they've had enough. And hopefully, truly, we can change that culture. But this was how some of the details about that. So he was charged with raping a 23-year-old woman in 2001, a 28-year-old woman in early 2003, and a 23-year-old woman in late 2003. And these 3 counts came after a 3-year investigation, which began in 2017, after several of those same women filed a civil lawsuit against him. And basically, their allegations prompted the LA Police Department to start looking into him. But you know, just the details that came out about this Church of Scientology's efforts to suppress and keep these allegations from coming forward. One of the victims said that she believes that they stalked her and killed at least one of their pets. I mean, that just horrified me. She's I think her husband's a singer as well.
Yeah, it's Chrissy's husband.
Yes.
Chrissy Bixler's husband. Yeah, and I mean, he's even from the outside looking in. People knew Danny Masterson was acting like this. He even, like the first girl, basically she was drugged. And so she was like, look, I don't want to do this. He just told her, shut the up, you know. And so she said, I felt like I was going to die. Because he didn't just drug them and rape them, he sodomized them.
Yes.
You know, he's a nasty man. And then it was about
the power.
Oh, yeah. The second one said he was, you know, raping her, and she kind of pushed him off of her. She said, he drug her to wherever he's going to rape her by the hair. So she thought, I'm going to grab him by the hair. But in her mind, she knew this MFer has a rule. There's a no touch the hair rule and no touch the face rule. Look, you ain't all that and stuff. So she pulled his hair and hit him in the face. So he got mad, and he got up from there, and he kicked her, and he spat upon her and called her trash and dragged her all across the floor. Okay, that's that one. Then woman number 3 said, she's all no. No means effing no, you know? And so no condom. He made her take all her clothes off there. And she said, I don't want to get a disease. He said, disease is just in your mind. And she said, I felt like a rag doll when he got through raping me.
I know. Bless her little heart. Yeah, because it's about the power.
Yeah, we're going to act like because he's on the 70s show in some bell bottoms and a low slung belt and a shirt down the ear, he can rape people?
So the civil suit was being filed right before this documentary came out exposing a lot of these allegations against Masterson. And this is, I think, the timing of all of this and these relationships, again, of these institutions that are involved. So in early 2017, the show Leah Remini, Scientology in the Aftermath, had filmed a 2-hour episode that focused on these sexual assault allegations against Masterson. They had multiple people that supposedly had been victimized by him. It was going to air in, I think, during season 2, and the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office apparently asked A&E not to air that episode until they finished their investigation and decided whether or not they were going to charge him. So they wait like a year and a half. And then basically they were like, well, we're tired of waiting. We're just going to go ahead and announce that we're doing this, running this episode. And that's when A&E and Disney were basically attacked with letters from Scientologists, which delayed the episode from airing. And it finally did in August of 2019. And it was a 2-hour special titled Waiting for Justice. And a week before it aired, 4 of those accusers filed a civil suit against Masterson and the Church of Scientology. So that was the timing of it all. And it was after that basically he was charged with criminal behavior. But yeah, they were all members of the Church of Scientology at the time that he had done that, allegedly. Well, I guess it's not allegedly anymore. He was convicted of 2 of them.
Well, and I mean, we have to keep in mind, too, this is 20 years in the making. These are, let's say, young women, 23. You're different at 23 than 43. You know, you've learned a lot, and you've stood up, and you've taken a lot, and, you know, right's right. I don't know what the problem is. But this is during the time of Me Too. And enough is enough.
Yes.
And so people are speaking up. It's not about men and women. It's about right and wrong and rape and this, that, and the other. Nobody wants to be raped. No man wants to be raped. I don't understand why people say, oh, well, they just did it. You know, that's not right. This man finally lost his job with Netflix. And that
he was dropped by his talent agency.
Yeah, they're like, we don't want nothing to do. Finally. I mean, but if this would have happened in the 50s, they would have said whatever. Anytime someone asks you to sign a piece of paper that says, if I do all kind of wrong stuff and evil stuff and stupid stuff and kill you, you can't do anything about it. Effing don't sign that.
I know. I agree, Pam. Well, and just what these poor ladies went through, like one of the plaintiffs claimed that her dog died from unexplained traumatic injuries to its trachea and its esophagus. And I don't know if it was the same plaintiff or a different one, but they also said that there was a dog that they had that they believed they had to put down because it was poison.
Yeah, that was the Bixlers.
Somebody put rat poison in raw meat. But these ladies go on to say that church members chased one of them as she drove her car, filmed her without her permission, harassed her online, posted ads on social media sites soliciting sex in her name. Another plaintiff said she and her neighbors saw a guy taking pictures of her from the driveway, and later that night somebody broke in a window in her 13-year-old daughter's bedroom. So the threats are more than implicit, you know, and Masterson, of course, has denied any involvement in all of this and said that, you know, that he's looking forward to defending himself in civil court.
Well, good.
I believe it's continuing.
Yeah. Well,
but yeah, he's in prison now. I mean, as far as his life has gone to shit, to say the least. Pardon my French. But yeah, I mean, he's in prison now. Yeah. His wife has left him, and she was a stand by your man kind of gal. She was getting on social media, taking shots at some of these women that had stepped forward and said her man was drugging and raping them. And now she's left him.
Oh, yeah. Well, see what they had to do the first day at the courthouse to make a selfie, you know, bijou.
Talk about not reading the room.
Right. Then they deleted it. But that's what they did. She's no dummy. She knew everything's fixing to fall apart. You know, these people are worth millions, but I start reading people worth 6 or 8 million. So what? That ain't a lot of money, is it?
Not anymore.
You know, what have you? And so this little crazy now, he's in the California men's colony. He went to the men's colony.
That's where he is now.
Yeah, that's where Charles Manson was in Sirhan. And then he went to Corcoran, and now he's in like another one. He's in Corcoran right now. But he's in one that's like minimal security. They got classes, they got self-improvement, they got learning anger management and stuff. So he went from like big boy prison to what I would say like being accidentally locked inside a junior college.
That doesn't sound too rough.
It's not too bad. But the 70s show, he will be in his 70s when he gets out. And what was so interesting about this, too, is a bunch of whiny people, a bunch of whiny movie stars, Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis. They decided they're going to be self-righteous and write a letter to the judge and say, we corporately are for him. He's got exceptional character and all this kind of stuff. They were thinking that's just going to go to the judge and that'll be shh. It got out for everybody. And the backlash on them was phenomenal, that they were kind of beaten to submission. And they're like, no, we're sorry. We believe victims. We were talking about the guy from 25 years ago. Well, that seems quite ignorant. Is that the guy?
That's the guy
that raped
who's
the
being
girls?
accused.
Yeah. So, it was a terrible publicity thing that happened to them. And a lot of them wrote letters like that, a lot of movie stars. So then I think that Ashton and them on their very own board of an anti-sex trafficking organization they started, and I'm sure they started it for good. Well, people said, we don't want you on your own board.
Right.
So, I mean, you have to be careful. Be careful who you co-sign on with. And you can't tell me they didn't understand and see that baughty behavior that he did.
Well, and how much of it was okay.
Yeah. And it's
mind.
Never okay.
No, it's
never
not okay.
Because they were, if you think it's okay, you're doing it too.
Right, or turning the other eye, or benefiting by turning the other eye.
Looking away.
And that's what you're starting to see with the whole Kevin Spacey drama. He was not convicted. He has been charged and accused multiple times. And that's another documentary that I just watched recently, and I thought it was fascinating. But people are saying we miss his talent. He was another one that was blackballed from the industry. And these people are now saying, well, he never was convicted. We're denying this great talent a chance to use his gifts and entertain the world. And I have to say, I do struggle with that. Now, that being said, when I've listened to these victims and these accounts and watched these documentaries and read multiple articles, I've been remembering Kevin Spacey since I was on the anchor desk 15, 20 years ago, and he got popped for like messing with somebody in a bathroom in London, and it was an underage young man, if you will. And I just knew then something was wrong. I just felt like there was something wrong. So that being said, personally, in my opinion, I believe these victims. I do get that he wasn't convicted of these criminal allegations. And I understand also that who he is as an actor, whether even you look at Michael Jackson, you know, and all the terrible allegations that he faced too. There are people that claim that he molested them, and they have a hard time listening to his music. And I don't discount their experiences or what they went through. And I can totally see how they would feel that way. But I grew up listening to Michael Jackson. I did not have that experience with Michael Jackson. I do enjoy listening to him in the you know, on the radio or whatever. But like, I think about that with Kevin Spacey too, and all these people that have basically been ostracized. Charlie Rose is another one, PBS interviewer. All these women came forward, very similar stories. And that's just something else that's so believable about when you have a person who's got serial accusations against them, and there's so many similarities, you know, call me crazy, but I'm going to probably believe all these victims, and at least that where there's smoke, there's fire. But do you throw the baby out with the bathwater? Do you say, I will not tolerate anything from you? I don't want to see you again. I don't want to hear from you again. I don't want you to use any of your gifts or way of making a living, your talents, because you have been accused or in some cases convicted of this terrible criminal behavior. I don't give a crap what happens to Danny Masterson. I can be honest about that for sure. I think what happened with Michael Jackson's terrible, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if some of those allegations were true. But am I going to change the channel when Beat It comes on? You know, probably not.
Well, I think part of it too is people think they're untouchable, and they're not. And I believe that things have to be right. You can't convict people if it's not right. But what victim goes, let me see, I'm 43 years old now. I'm all right in my career. Let me get on out here in these streets and court and stuff and complicate my life and talk about how this man raped me and slapped me down and kicked me and called me trash and then made me feel like a rag doll. Let me F up my life like that.
I agree.
You know, you got to look at that too. And I don't miss Kevin Spacey's talent. I don't care. There are a dime a dozen actors are. But when you start raping someone's body, I don't care what happens to you. I just don't. And that's not the right way to be, but it's how I feel right now at this point in time.
Well, and I will definitely agree with you about the whole Kevin Spacey thing. When I watched that last documentary, and again, been following his career and these allegations against him for a long time, well before this stuff even exploded in the public. And my heart goes out to these people. And to your point, in that particular case, as well as like with Harvey Weinstein, there was almost this lording of their power over their victims. And I think in that regard, this punishment of you're ostracized from the very business that enabled you to do this terrible, putrid behavior, you no longer get to participate in this tiered system anymore. You know, you're kicked out of the kingdom, if you will. So I get that, and I don't necessarily fault it. I just think it's interesting that it's, you know, people are calling for him to return to roles.
Well, they can go watch him. I won't. But the thing too is that the Church of Scientology doing all the stuff that they do to manipulate people,
absolutely, and maintain
wrong.
power and maintain money. I mean, yeah, we've heard it over and over again. I think, Nicole Kidman even talks about when she separated from Tom Cruise, how the church completely ostracized her. She has little to no relationship with the 2 children that she adopted with Tom because they raised them in the Church of Scientology, and they've got this philosophy that once you're out of the church, you're, a suppressive person and you can't be in the system. That is cult behavior.
Right.
Anything that isolates you from your family of origin, and in some cases, people do need to be isolated. If their family of origin is abusive, by all means, steer clear and far and away from them. But when an organization, an institution is trying to separate you from people who love you and care about you, they don't love and care about you. They're out to protect themselves and whatever money they've got, which is apparently quite a bit.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I know one thing. I felt that isolation and being separated going into court for my sister for many things that were going wrong with her estate and were not benefiting her child, my niece left behind, and seeing the wrongdoing. Every time I'd go, a judge would get on their side or say that I'm just going to have to spend more money to do it. I've spent $100,000, fooling with all this stuff, and I'll never stop. But you feel that way. I tell myself a lot, you have to work hard to find a corrupt lawyer, a corrupt judge, a corrupt guardian ad litem, a corrupt psychologist, a corrupt another lawyer to all get together, and they are basically raping a child, not in the physical way, but every other way, and they get a golf clap.
That's right. It's the apathy of the institution again, too, I think, that that nobody's trying to do the right thing. They're just trying to do the easy thing.
New thing now, advocates are not taking any of this. I don't care what the cause is. People are going, this ain't right. What's wrong with y'all? I'm from Alabama. That's where we go. This shit ain't right, Come on, let's fix it. But these people want to keep doing it. So, I mean, this is the new way it is now.
Yeah, I mean, from that 70s show to prison, the Danny Masterson case is a perfect example. So anyway, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Well, Pam, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we thank you for joining us for From That 70s Show to Prison, the Danny Masterson case. Appreciate you joining us for this episode of Gulf Coast Confidential. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher, Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to our director, editor, and production engineer, the man who makes it all happen, James Roy. And remember, you can listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and you can watch it right here on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. Just don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Subscribe.